Okay, so I did a video a few days ago talking about the SEC 366 model and how the SEC is finally going to 9 games and whatnot. And I've already explained how the model works, so I'm not going to give too much of a rerun over it. But every SEC team is going to get three annual opponents, and then they'll rotate six of the other six opponents for their 9 game conference schedule on a semi-annual basis. So that time, SEC members will have played everybody in their conference at least once over a 2 year period. And every 4 years, they'll play each other at least once, both away and at home, meaning on campus, outside of your neutral site matchups. So now that that's clearly been quickly covered, I'm going to give you the 3 teams I predict for each team. And it was not easy. It kind of gets harder and harder when you get towards the bottom of the list here because you've used up all the opponents for said matchups. But for Alabama, we're going to do this alphabetical order. Alabama, I picked Auburn, LSU, Tennessee. Auburn and Tennessee are locks. Iron Bowl, third Saturday in October. The two of the biggest rivalries in college football overall. Two of the biggest rivalries in SEC football. It's obviously they're gonna keep those games together. And third opponent, I went LSU. LSU among Alabama and other programs in this conference are kind of tough because they have a lot of rivals. I picked LSU because I figured it was the most entertaining game for Alabama to play, and I think if you're the SEC, you still kind of want to keep, you know, the teams uh, that have big rivalries and big traditional rivalries, and that attract a lot of attention. And Alabama, LSU does it. I think LSU is easily Alabama's third biggest opponent behind Tennessee and Auburn. I don't think it's up for debate. Some people would say maybe Mississippi State, but I don't think it. I mean, yeah, there's close proximity, but I just think LSU, Alabama is a bigger draw, and the SEC is going to want ratings. So it would make sense for them to have LSU as that third opponent. For Arkansas, this was tough. They hate a lot of people in the SEC. I wanted to give them the LSU game, but at the same time, I just used them for Alabama, so I didn't want to pigeonhole myself with LSU and not give them, you know, some good options for later. So I went with Ole Miss because and then Ole Miss, Missouri, and Texas. Now Arkansas, if you know about Arkansas fans, they hate Texas, so that was an easy one. Missouri, they've developed a rivalry called the Battle Line rivalry toward the end of the game. Apparently, it's being promoted as a big SEC rivalry on rivalry weekend, the day before the finals, before rivalry Saturday, where all the teams across the country are playing their rivals. And Missouri and Arkansas, because their border states, have developed the Battle Line rivalry, and it's been a nice. It's been There've been some competitive games between these two, and it seems like while either fan base may not consider it a true rivalry, they seem to get pretty emotional when this game is played in. Ole Miss, before Missouri showed up, they were the closest geographical team in the conference to Arkansas, and they were big rivals, and they have a long history with each other as well. So for Arkansas, it was Ole Miss, Missouri, and Texas. It was kind of hard leaving out, Texas A&M and LSU, but like I said, Arkansas has a lot of rivals. Auburn, obviously, we talked about the Iron Bowl. Another obvious one is Georgia, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. They've played each other over 150 times, more than Auburn has played Alabama, more than Alabama has played Tennessee, more than Georgia has played Florida. It's the oldest rivalry in the SEC, and they really hate each other. Auburn and Georgia does. And for the third opponent, I picked Mississippi State because Mississippi State really, outside of the Egg Bowl, doesn't really have a lot of high key, annual matchups. And I picked Auburn because, well, they actually have played each other. Auburn, Mississippi State has more than Auburn has played Alabama in the Iron Bowl. As crazy as that is. They played each other almost 100 times. I think they played each other like 97 times. So I think it was a good idea to have Auburn and Mississippi State go at it with each other. And that way you can make sure that Mississippi State gets a big time opponent to draw in viewers for them as well, and not just have it be, just the big names going up against each other, the big national SEC brands going against each other. You want to make sure everybody is getting their fair promotion in this setup. So for Auburn, I'm going to say it again: Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. For my Gators, Georgia is obviously one of those protected rivalries that in the SEC, like I said about Alabama and Auburn, Alabama and Tennessee, Auburn and Georgia, Florida and Georgia is that protected rivalry as well. And I also I have them reigniting the annual matchup that Florida used to have with South Carolina. South Carolina joined the SEC in 1992, and they played Florida every year from 1992 to 2023. So about 31, 32 years straight they've been playing each other. And I don't consider South Carolina to be a rivalry, a big rivalry for Florida because, you know, of all the other rivals that Florida has with Miami and Florida State and Georgia and Tennessee and LSU and what used to be the annual rivalry with Auburn. But I think South Carolina, but like I said with Mississippi State, you want to make sure every program is getting their fair promotional big game with this type of matchup. So I make sure to give. So I gave Florida South Carolina because you also got to make sure you fill up rivalries with South Carolina as well. So I gave South Carolina, Florida, and obviously I just mentioned it earlier, the Florida-Tennessee rivalry. I enjoy the Florida-Tennessee rivalry. I mean, not as much because Tennessee is actually good, and they're actually starting to beat Florida on a more regular basis. But Florida still dominates the Tennessee rivalry, and I think there's still a lot of Tennessee fans who have that hatred for the orange and blue. And there's some Tennessee fans who have said that even when Florida is playing Alabama, they root for Alabama because they hate Florida that much. So the Florida-Tennessee rivalry is still going. And even when the SEC got rid of their division formats the last 2 years, they made sure to keep Florida and Tennessee together. So I think that rivalry is gonna stay for a while. Um, so for Florida, it's Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Georgia, we already talked about the rivalries with Auburn and Florida, and I gave them South Carolina as well. South Carolina and Georgia are rivals. Well, depending on which Georgia and South Carolina fan you talk to, they play each other. They've played each other almost. I think they wait. They haven't. They didn't play each other last year, and I don't think they play each other this year. But you know, Georgia and South Carolina, there's a border between them along along Augusta, Georgia, and you know, if you're in that region, there's a lot of trash talk between South Carolina and Georgia fans. And it depends on which, like I said, which fan you talk to. But I think you can make the argument that there's enough proximity and hostility between these two to have them face each other every year. That and they both have hedges in their stadiums, and I think that's a cool thing. That's one thing that they kind of beef over. You know, that they play with the same style of planting their bush hedges around the football field. I think that's a pretty cool thing that they share in common. So for Georgia, Auburn, Florida, South Carolina, Kentucky, this is where it started to get a little bit difficult. I gave Kentucky, Mississippi State. They've played each other over. They've played each other quite a bit, almost 50 times. I gave Kentucky, South Carolina. So now South Carolina is rounded out with Georgia, Florida, and Kentucky. And I gave them Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt and Kentucky have played each other almost 100 times. They've played each other, I think, 99 times. When they play each other this upcoming year, it'll be the 100th matchup between the excuse me, I got that wrong. Almost 100 times, and I think it will be closer to that. Maybe not the 100th time, but it will be closer to that between the Commodores and the Wildcats, and they'll play each other. So for Kentucky, I picked Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. And it removes the Tennessee rivalry that Kentucky has with Vanderbilt, but Tennessee has a lot of rivals, so it's kind of. And I already gave them Alabama and Florida, so you didn't want to necessarily take that away. And giving Tennessee, Kentucky will take away the Vanderbilt rivalry, and the SEC is not going to do that. I think they'll part ways with Tennessee and Kentucky before Tennessee and Vanderbilt. LSU, I picked Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. I already talked about LSU's rivalry with Alabama. Ole Miss is the Magnolia Bowl. They're the number 2 rivals to the Rebels behind the Mississippi State Bulldogs in the Egg Bowl. And I gave LSU Texas A&M because there have been some competitive matchups between those two teams. There's also been some good trash talk between those programs as well over the years since Texas A&M has joined the SEC, and they were in the SEC West together. So they played each other on an annual basis. Last 2 years is no different, even with the divisions going away. So for LSU, I picked Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. Ole Miss, I'd already talked about Arkansas, I already talked about LSU. I just made a reference to the Egg Bowl. They're not getting rid of that. That's a protected rivalry. Ole Miss and Mississippi State are still going to have the Egg Bowl there. So for Ole Miss, it's Arkansas, LSU, and Mississippi State. And I don't think Ole Miss fans would be too upset about that. As long as they got LSU and the Egg Bowl still together, I don't think they would be upset about facing Ole Miss. For Mississippi State, I already talked about the Egg Bowl thing. I already mentioned them with Kentucky and Auburn. I said Auburn, Kentucky, and Ole Miss. I've already gone through that, so I'm not going to rehash that. Missouri, I already talked about the rivalry with Arkansas. I picked Oklahoma because, of the Big 12, background between them. I think there's still some hostility between the fan bases and the program. And I just think that would be a nice sell for Oklahoma, who for them to face Missouri. Vanderbilt's kind of an odd one as that third choice for Missouri, but like I said, some teams are just going to there was going to be an odd matchup at some point in this, and for Missouri I gave them Vanderbilt. So for Missouri, it's Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt. Oklahoma, Missouri, I just talked about them. Obviously, it's going to be Texas, the Red River rivalry. I think it's the number 2 rivalry in college football behind only Ohio State and Michigan. Obviously, Oklahoma and Texas. Last year they had the SEC for the first time since they had all SEC mascots at the game for the first time because it was the first time ever that the Red River rivalry was going to be contested as an SEC opponent. SEC get conference game, and to have all those mascots there was pretty nice. They were obviously going to face each other. That's obviously a protected rivalry, and I gave them Texas A&M because again, the Big 12, background between those two teams. So for Oklahoma, it's Missouri, Texas, and Texas A&M. South Carolina, I've already talked about them. Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Vanderbilt. I've already talked about the Vanderbilt-Tennessee rivalry. Texas, obviously I talked about them with Arkansas, talked about them with Oklahoma, and the Texas A&M rivalry, which came back last year. And those three fan bases, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M, they all hate Texas. So that's pretty reasonable to why I put them together. Texas A&M, I already talked about their matchups with LSU, Texas, and Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Missouri, and Tennessee. So that's the route that I chose with these with the 3-6-6 model for the for each team to have a 3 permanent rivals. I probably messed up with giving Missouri Vanderbilt, but it wasn't. This was not an easy list to. This wasn't an easy list to put together. This is actually not my first time doing this, and each time I've done it one different way than the other time because it's just kind of hard figuring out which team to pair up with who. So this probably will be the last time I'll ever do this because it's kind of tiring. But those are my three. Those are the 3 choices I made for each team. If you think that I made a mistake somewhere, tell me so in the comments and tell me why. I'll talk to y'all later.